Welcome to Where's the Any Key, the podcast where we talk shop about topics, tips, and trends for the modern IT admin. I'm your host, Ryan Bacon, the IT support manager at JumpCloud. My guest today is Reilly Scull. He's the CTO at Macktez. Reilly, thank you for joining.
Happy to be here.
All right. Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
I'm a born and raised New Yorker, and was always just taking apart everything I could find growing up, playing with Legos, destroying printers, computers. Went to school for mechanical and aerospace engineering, and when I moved back home to New York after school, couldn't get a job in engineering that wasn't in defense, and I didn't really want to work for a defense company, and ended up falling back into IT, which I had kind of always been a computer nerd growing up, and worked at a few IT consulting places before arriving at Macktez, and had been there for about 10 years. We used to be more of a only IT consulting, and we would work with a lot of small creative agencies. Now we do medium business, larger project consulting, and also have an MSP side of the business that handles the run-of-the-mill, the same problems that everyone runs into everywhere. The things that I love about this job and career are the head scratchers and the things that you can kind of lean back and be like, this is so cool. I think, one of the things that we're going to get into today is about things that we all find really cool, and the areas that we're most interested in are the areas where, or at least that I'm interested in, are the areas where I constantly want to be pushing the envelope and trying new and cool and innovative and not complex for the sake of complexity, but not turning away from complexity when there's interesting stuff to be done.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's on that quest for continual improvement that for me and for you, and I think for a lot of other people, that a big drive of that is going out there and seeing what's that new shiny thing, but not just is it shiny, but can it be effective? Can it be is it doing something innovative, and how can I lean in or leverage that innovation to help me or help my team? So I'll start off with you. What's something that you've seen that comes to mind, that what's a cool technology or cool even like a process or practice that you saw that you're like, I got to start doing that, and that you've implemented and has helped you out?
I think that the two things that come most to mind. One is identity and access management and the whole JumpCloud side, which we can get into in a little bit. And another is on the network engineering side.
Mm-hmm.
I find that when I'm interviewing candidates for both my company and when we're interviewing IT candidates for people where we're going to place them at our clients, network engineering tends to be a relatively weak skill for a lot of folks. It can be pretty daunting to get into, but once you kind of wrap your head around the principles there and are not afraid of digging into data sheets and command line references, there's just so much awesome stuff that can happen under the hood. A number of years ago, I was really interested to start playing with VMware. And we had a client that called us up, said, hey, we got to migrate our entire VMware environment. Reilly, can you do it for us? I was like, great, haven't done this before. Time to roll up my sleeves and learn everything there is to know about it. And, many, many nights of staying up till 4 a.m, reading documentation, getting on the phone with support to clarify questions that I had, until a certain point where I was like, all right, I feel like I understand this thing backwards and forwards. And the networking side of virtualization can be really interesting, and it all can also be like pretty mundane. And at the particular client, they had probably 4 brand new Dell hosts. One new Dell host, probably quarter to half a terabyte of RAM each, and a big SAN that was also a Dell EMC big flash array. And the project basically entailed Humpty Dumptying this thing, where we took it all apart and rebuilt it from scratch in an idealized fashion when it was first set up. And to the point about continual improvement and what does it mean to like be complacent versus pushing the envelope. The hosts had 4 10 gig NICs each. Only 2 of them were being used, one for data, one for iSCSI. And the SAN had 8 10 gig interfaces, only 4 of which were wired up. And while I don't think anyone in the office was complaining about their iSCSI performance, I'm like, why didn't you use all the NICs? They're at your disposal. So when I rebuilt it, it was let's use every little bit we can. 2 for iSCSI, 2 for data. Doing ether channel bonding on the data side to have better load balancing and better use of the 2, so that you can achieve a 20 gig link instead of just load balancing where each individual VM can only get 10. And on the iSCSI side, in addition to just having more NICs on the storage appliance, there's a thing within iSCSI where you are deciding how to send commands over multiple links. And within VMware, the default policy is a round robin, where it goes, all right, first I'm going to do NIC 1, then I'm going to do NIC 2, then I'm going to do NIC 3. And it does this every 1,000 transactions, it hops to the next one. So at any given moment, you're only using 1 NIC. And then 1,000 transactions later, it hops to the next one. So that accomplishes redundancy, but it doesn't really help you with bulk throughput. And there's a small little command you can issue to these things where you change the frequency at which it jumps from one NIC to the other from 1,000 to 1. So after every single transaction, it jumps. So if you have a transaction that, let's just say it takes 5 milliseconds, and then 1 millisecond, you execute that on NIC 1. A few milliseconds, 2 milliseconds later, you have another command issued. That second command is getting issued on another NIC at the same time, right? You're now using multiple NICs at the same time. This is a really small little thing, but means that you, in addition to now having redundancy, you're also improving your throughput. And this is the type of thing where it's like, well, this is cool. How can we get more juice out of this engine, right? What is the ignition timing on this? Like, how can we really dial in? And what, I really like getting into the weeds on a data sheet and trying to understand, well, exactly how does this work? What can we do? What's the envelope that can be pushed? At another client, I had to build another one from scratch. And when I did a iPerf speed test from one VM to another that were on separate hosts on separate SANs, we're getting a 5 gig per second iPerf speed, which is pretty quick. I mean, of like practical read write with your SSD caching backed by spinning drives with all of your load balancing and all the various algorithms to see what the like actual, at the racetrack, what is this thing clocking in at? It's really fun and interesting to kind of push the envelope, where the consulting firm or the IT admins that had come before me in that client environment, they were like, well, I guess 2 NICs is fine. And I guess we don't have to deal with like optimizing the path selection. And it worked before I got in there, but it worked like 4 to 8 times faster when I was done. and those types of projects are just really enjoyable to really sink your teeth into. And it doesn't doesn't end at network engineering. It, I think that the work that I'm doing when I use JumpCloud really speaks to that, right? It's pretty easy to say, hey, here's your single sign-on provider. We're going to use JumpCloud, and we've got the local agent installed through computer, and we bound it to Google, and that's the end of that, right? But go the extra step, federate. Don't have multiple MFA keys across different orgs. Federate everything back. Have a single unified experience. Don't stop at just your computer and Google. Get Azure AD in there. Get your access control. Get your password management and your security systems, the accounting systems, the HR systems. Get everything you can in there, and don't stop. And when you say like, all right, well, we got SAML working, where can we use SCIM? How can we manage provisioning? Like, all right, they don't maybe support native SCIM, but they do have an Azure AD application that'll allow you to do that. Well, if you're federated to Azure, you can set up your system between your HR system and or whatever it is in Azure AD, and have that push right back into JumpCloud because it's all federated. And just not really, it's not taking no for an answer, but not taking the easy off ramp, right? It's like, well, how far down this road can we go? And so those are the things, that style of pushing your own complacency, right? At any given point, you could say, well, this is good enough. And I think that, at least in my company, I am not wearing the business hat. I am wearing the like nerd hat. So I'm the one who's always pushing for super cool solutions. And then the business side is like, all right, well, is this profitable? Is this reasonable? And there's a checks and balances there. And it's not always advisable to do the most technical implementation you can. It also depends who's going to have to support this thing, right? Yeah. And the knowledge gap is a real thing between the people who maybe design and the people who have to maintain it. So you got to be like cognizant of that. But my preference is, well, let's just teach everyone about all this stuff and get them on the same page, and like, don't let that be the barrier to doing cool stuff.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the business hat and then the tech geek hat, because there's I for your background, for a little bit of, for me, is that I have an undergrad degree in accounting and my a master's in computer information systems. So I have that inner accountant, that inner accounting nerd. And when you were talking about making those changes, those tweaks to the NIC, and doing that initial optimization that a lot of people would consider above and beyond, my inner accounting nerd kind of sat back and like, that affects total cost of ownership. That increases longevity of the appliance. Because if you really optimize from the get-go and put in all these cutting edge practices and these settings and everything like that, 3 years down the line, it's going to be a lot less likely that somebody's going to be like, this is slow, we need to replace it. And so the business side and the business needs, as well as the need to improve and a need to be on the cutting edge, are not mutually exclusive. I mean, you are very right that there can definitely be a disconnect there. And there is that knowledge gap, and that's where like the documentation and like how we did this, how this gets maintained, and everything like that comes into play.
It's really, I think it all comes down to the documentation. And you want to be not, penny wise, pound foolish. What you put in is going to be what you get out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's total cost of ownership, both in terms of like, yeah, your hardware appliance, but there's also the productivity of everyone who's on the staff there, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many minutes a day did they wait while a spinny wheel went, integrated over the lifetime of this appliance, times every person who had to deal with that? And shaving off a fraction of a second is huge.
Yeah.
One of my main hobbies that I've been doing for 20 years is sailboat racing. And you often have races that I've seen races that are across the ocean that take weeks, and boats are finishing photo finish. Even so, if you are a fraction of a percent faster than somebody, you're going to beat them by miles, days, perhaps. And really small changes can have really meaningful impact by the time you reach the end of the story, which is why I think that really trying to get as much juice out of the orange as you can, I think it pays dividends almost always. There are obviously exceptions, but I more and more often I'm happy that I was like, oh, good thing we did that, right? Like, and when I've had other external firms audit my work, I can always be like extremely proud and confident, be like, yeah, come check this thing out. It's sweet. Instead of being like, ooh, don't look in there. My room's really messy, right? Like, and speaking to like messiness, I think when you and I connected the other day, we talked a little bit for a moment about like cable porn. And I am like a big believer in TechFlex and really nicely routed cables. And I've started using, the extending cable management arms and all the blades, so that I've built systems where we configured it, built it, and handed it off to another company for them to like run with. And it's a really nice feeling to be like, yeah, well, when you go in this room, it's going to be immaculate and everything's going to have meticulous documentation. And all the cables are labeled on both ends. So you're like, where's this going? Oh, no, I can see. And they're color coded wherever possible. And when, one of the aspects that I deal with in my job is designing disaster recovery, right? When you are building out a server room, I'm thinking about disaster recovery then, right? When shit hits the fan, pardon my French, you don't want to be chasing your tail about where does this cable go? I don't know what's going on. When everything is super clear lines, Velcroed just where they need to be, and everything is like, oh, okay, this makes sense, and this exactly matches the documentation. This is a lot easier to troubleshoot. It's a lot easier to deal with. And when you're in that crisis mode of something's not working, having put that extra legwork in at the front end pays dividends there too. It's not just in the performance, it's also when something goes wrong, being able to be really confident that the foundation is solid, right? So those are more of the things that I'm just like, this is really cool. And cable management's one of those weird things where, like, for me, I do cable management the same way I play with Legos. I build it, and then I take it back. I'm like, you know what? I bet I could do this a little better. What if I move this over here? What if I do that? It's an iterative process. Rarely am I like done a whole rack, and the first go out, I'm like, this is how I want it to be, right? Throughout, you're like, ooh, actually, let's bring this fiber cable over here. I want to route it this way or that way, or maybe let's use a different length. I've changed my path. And just that is another area where it's extremely easy to be complacent. And the business hat may say, don't spend 15 hours wiring this thing up. And I'm like, no, I want to spend 30. Like,
yeah,
give me more time.
Because then you're saving 100 hours trying to figure things out. And by the way, I'm glad that you mentioned Velcro, because I was worried that we might get into an argument, because I absolutely detest zip ties in server rooms.
Yep.
and
we basically got a moratorium on anti-zip tie. There are a couple exceptions. I think when you're bringing a fiber cable in from outside, then it's probably all right. But once you hit the rack, it's all Velcro.
Yeah, exactly. And I like the iterative process for doing cable management in a server room. I totally agree with you on there, because I'm thinking back to when we spun up our second office, our second fresh build. I mean, we've set up multiple offices from like temporary moves as we were growing, but like when we got like our official like JumpCloud headquarters, and then like our office in downtown Denver, that actually was fresh construction, or fresh renovation and everything like that. And we had the chance to where we had to have all the cable run. We had the low voltage contractor go in there, terminate it all how we want it. And like our Denver office is a lot smaller than the Louisville office, especially network size. And I decided to try something new. I'm like, okay, let's go. We're only going to have, because of the size of it, we're only going to have 4 48 port switches in there, and and a few other appliances. And so I'm like, let's try doing patch panel switch, patch panel switch, patch panel switch.
Definitely the way to go.
And doing, I think we just used like 6-inch jumpers to go between, so we didn't have to go run down cable management channels or anything like that. And we have like what the patch is, on the patch panel, we have it labeled what it is, but like having that saved us time on not having to label the actual cable, because it's just 6 inches and you can see, okay, this is this is a WAP right here.
Huge believer in the patch panel switch orientation. We also use 6-inch cables for all of those. And I'm in the practice of the standard documentation we build when we do something like that includes what is the network interface on the switch. So I'm often using Cisco switches. Big fan of Cisco. And when you're stacking, they're all one logical unit. So it's not like this is port 48. This is chassis 3 port 48 expansion module for using Catalyst or whatever. And we will capture every run from a patch panel. So run 177 corresponds to GI1 or GI3 117. And that means that when we're working remotely and someone says, hey, I'm sitting at my desk and I plugged into port 117, I can SSH into the switch and know exactly what port that they are in, right? And that's speaking to the documentation, instead of being like, oh, well, I got to go fumble around the server room or try and get your MAC address and chase it down on the network. Having that really clean cabling flow and having the corresponding documentation to know end to end, how does everything connect? Is just such a huge time saver when you get into actual administration and doing stuff.
You just gave my team a to-do task, because I was thinking we're pretty good on how we have things labeled. We'll have our conference rooms are like on our interface for the network management. So we are using a Ubiquity stack. They're Unify stack. So we're able to label ports and everything like that. And we have them labeled like this is this conference room, this is that conference room, and stuff like that. But all of the ports out and about in the office, like on our power beams and everything like that, those aren't labeled. And you say that, I'm like, oh, we should do that. So that, I mean, because I could, yeah, that just being like, hey, this is on port, I'm on outlet 123, and just being like, okay, I mean, we could, being that there's like in that office there are 4 switches, it's not difficult to do the math on it since everything's in line. But
yeah, but you make one exception. Someone goes in one day and they go, oh, well, actually this Cat 6, we're gonna patch this is with an HDMI Balun kit in the middle, and now this thing's out of sequence, right?
yeah, exactly.
Having that documentation and it be explicit in maintaining it, right? It's only as good as if you maintain it. If people make changes to the infrastructure without updating documentation, it's a recipe for disaster. Someone goes on vacation, someone else tries to jump in, they follow the documentation, it's not accurate, can be a mess. So in addition to just trying to capture that documentation, which is, I think, it's just so critical to be able to say, hey, we've got, like, there will always be a skill spectrum, right?
Mm-hmm.
A competency spectrum between the various members on a given team. And unless that senior most person plans on never leaving, never sleeping, never dying, then the method of communication for someone else to be able to administer any of this stuff to any degree is documentation. And in the earlier days of my career, I got burned by myself not creating that documentation, and going on vacation was really stressful to be like, ooh, so there's a bunch of Linux servers and I didn't write anything down, so good luck managing those while I'm gone. And now, 10, 15 years later, you learn from your mistakes and write it all down.
Yeah, and I will say that I'm, in a way, that I'm lucky that I met up with, so JumpCloud we have our technical writing team, and I not that long ago, just like a month or so ago, I reached out to them and was like, can you guys help us with our documentation? Because we have, if we have this resource, why not use it? And I think that's another way of doing, cutting edge thing. We have a bunch of professional writers.
So this is an interesting one, because I think that, and when we spoke the other day, this came up, that when people feel that they're in a time crunch and the business side is saying you don't have 30 hours, you have 5, the documentation is often one of the first things to suffer. And I also think that it can feel very tedious to author documentation. Which is another reason I think people procrastinate and they don't do it, because they can't, it's not fun, it's not sexy. But I would flip that and say that I know a couple people who would just love a good spreadsheet. And
I'm one of those people. I love a good spreadsheet.
When I am building sets of documentation and you're like, all right, time to make a really good spreadsheet. And I recently had our team build a network overview document, like topology, for a system that was for a small data center. And we got into, in addition to just like zooming out and, okay, you can see the big picture, every single NIC between every connection was documented, right? Where we have a graphic of the switch with hot connection points in every RJ45 and SFP connector, color coded to all of the ether channels. And it's like, all right, at a glance, you can see what this is. But if you squint and you look closely, you can see exactly how every single thing is wired. And every MAC address is listed, every VLAN tag is called out through a key and through like an elegant form of information dissemination. So in a single JPEG, I can convey a ton of super complex information. And to me, that is like super cool. It was so cool to see. It's like, all right, I could have drawn a napkin sketch and been like, here's an HA firewall and here's a switch and here's a server. But instead, now there's something that you could show to someone who was in the accounting team, and they could be like, oh, okay, so this is how that all works together. All right.
Yep.
Seems like a lot.
Yeah, for sure. And I like, even going back to the network stuff, like when planning them out, I know so many people who would do kind of the back of napkin sketches or just do stuff like that. Like ever since I was first introduced to the packet tracer application, like I fell in love with that. And like, even though not using Cisco switches or, Cisco products, I would still use that to plan out my racks, because okay, it's a 1U 48 port switch, firewall or an appliance we need to have sitting on a shelf. Like all of that I could replicate in there, have it, work on the routing, work on the layout, and be able to fuss around with it to be like, okay, maybe we go patch panel, switch patch panel, or whatever we end up doing. And yeah, I found that using a good proper tool from the beginning,
yeah,
going back to if you do it properly from the beginning, it's going to end up being a lot better.
Right.
And yeah, that's been one of my favorite things for rack planning.
When I have other team members take on these projects where I'm just kind of supervising, watching over their shoulder, I think the majority of the work is happening before they even plug the power in, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's all happening in these rack diagrams, and it's, all right, well, what is the IP configuration for this? What interface are you using for that? How is, like, I want to see it all planned out so that when you show up, you could have someone who was on the installation team who doesn't know about network engineering, and they can put everything in the rack exactly as you want, with the blank panels where you want, the brush panels where you want, and you can show up and you're just, at that point, you're just running through a checklist, right? You're like, exactly. Okay, I'm setting this to the thing that I said I was going to do, and this is what it's going to, and you're not figuring it out there. Of all the places that I have to like figure out a problem, sitting on a cold server room floor is not my favorite place to do it.
No.
Sitting on my couch is a bit nicer. I'm like, this looks good. I think this is going to work. And then you get there, and it's very nice when a plan comes together.
It really is. And that was the one of the most satisfying things after when we were working on our Louisville, Colorado office, is, we spent so much time, me and the other IT person, at the time it was just the two of us, getting all of the network stuff together, getting everything set up, actually, at the beginning fighting for, we want every desk to have an actual physical Ethernet port. We don't want to go Wi-Fi only, all of this, like, and then, okay, move-in day. And we're talking about a gaggle of software engineers. So productivity is money. That's really what it comes down to. And where people would come in, they knew where they're going to go sit. They came in, they plugged in their stuff, and they were up and running in like 10 minutes. And on day one move-in, people, people were working without issue within 10 minutes of walking in the door.
Yeah. I think that something you just said really resonates with a lot of the JumpCloud deployments that we're working on, where so much of IT is obfuscated. In fact, like 99% is obfuscated from the end user. Mm-hmm. If you've done your job correctly, IT is just magic, right? It just works. Mm-hmm. You're like, oh, I don't know how that works, but it just works. And that notion is really just based on perception. This was a lesson that it took me years to like have it sink in. But it's not actually how fast can I make that sand go. That is not the metric. The metric is, how do people feel about it? Do people feel great about this? If they feel great about it, you're probably in a good spot, right? Hopefully your security is also up there too. But and the things they can't see are work just as well. But When we are working with clients where we are taking on ownership of services, and we're functioning as an MSP, where a new hire comes in, they receive a computer. They've got a set of documentation that says, hey, welcome to this company. Here's how you log in. Here's what JumpCloud is. You're going to see this a whole bunch. And they open it up, and their accounts are automatically provisioned, and the MDM pushes the right software there, and their licenses are all just like, it just works, right? That perception, if you do that right, pays so many dividends. The end users are like, wow, these guys, that was so smooth. They don't even think about it, right?
Yeah.
You've done your job. No one's thinking about IT. And if you mess that part up, people get real ruffled eyebrows and scoff about and are like, this was not fun. I don't know how to check my email, and this is frustrating. And one of the, like, from my nerdy geeky side, I'm like, there's so much cool stuff under the hood that JumpCloud is doing, but that's not actually the main benefit. The main benefit is the perception on the end user side, where to them it is seamless and it's like magic. And they're like, wow, I don't have to think about this. Everything just works really the way, like, you stick your fingers out in front of your computer and it does what you want.
Yeah. During an interview for a new hire that I had, not too long ago, they asked me, I got that pretty standard question from a candidate of what does a successful person in this role, what does success in this role look like? And which is, a great question. And I almost answered it with, the normal standard, meet this metric, whatever. But then I thought about it. I'm like, what success looks like, on the very, very shallow level, is if you're happy and if I'm happy. That's what that looks like. Because if both of us are happy, that means our customers are happy. That means we're doing our job. That means security's happy. That means, it just branches out from there. If either of us are frustrated about something, that means there's something going wrong somewhere along the chain. But if both of us are happy, I know it's kind of a crunchy granola answer, but it goes to kind of what you were saying, is that it's not about, you're going to increase the throughput of our firewall by 10% this quarter. It is about perception. And honestly, with that perception comes, with a positive perception comes trust. It comes, like, when something goes, inevitably goes wrong, patience also comes along with that. If you've shown that you're 99.9% on your game, that 0.01% or that 0.1% where something goes wrong, people are tend to be a lot more forgiving.
It's not just
a lot more understanding.
So much of solving problems is information gathering.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm constantly confronted with situations where I'm like, this isn't a problem of ones and zeros. This is a problem of questions. We just need to ask questions. You ask the questions and everything else falls into place. And when users lose trust in their IT team, they don't go to them, and the IT team then is lacking the information, and it's that much harder for them to get the resolution, and it's this vicious circle. And when you've built a relationship of trust between the users and the IT team, and something comes up, and you're like, they're going to come to you right away and be like, hey, I noticed this weird thing, and here's the screenshot, and here's all the things and the timestamp, and here's even an export of the logs from that application.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I have a perfect example of this. The place where I worked at before JumpCloud, it was a nonprofit, fairly small nonprofit. The previous IT person was that stereotypical standoffish, condescending, I know better than everybody. I'm better than everybody here. And 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 that showed on the employees. They would not approach me. They would not, I would get a manager being like, this printer's hasn't been working for 3 months. I'm like, well, nobody told me that the printer wasn't working.
Exactly.
And so it didn't take me long where I started doing rounds, essentially. Just I'd go around, and not just like, it was partly to get to know people. It was to be like, hey, can I help you? And pretty much it was damage control. And just being like, hey, I'm here to help. If you tell me something's wrong, I'll fix it. And a lot of the times I would fix it, like, a lot of these are just small problems. I would fix it right then and there. And it was like after a month or so, I started getting tickets in. People would start emailing me, stopping by my desk, whatever. And I would never like turn somebody away.
It's like, I think it's easy for people in IT to think that they work in a technical field, when in many regards they work in a relationship management field, right? You are managing the relationship between a robot and a human.
Yes.
And if that relationship gets soured, you're not doing a very good job, even if the server runs super fast, right? Like that's not really what our job is. Our job is that alignment of those two. And one of the kind of motifs, not slogans, but one of the things that used to appear in our mission statement was about that we view technology as a user interface problem, right? That IT is really about, like, how can you remove the blockers and create an efficiency between the people who are trying to use technology and the technical tools themselves. And so much of, like, it used to be that in the early days of when everyone was getting MFA rolled out, no one would bite because the user experience was tough. They were like, what's this TOTP code? I don't understand. Is it different for my email as it is for my video conference, as it is for my whatever? The issue there was not a technical one. It's a user interface problem. It's people engaging with this technology. And it was fed to them in a non-digestible way. And, that's one of the areas where that I'm kind of like saying that's where JumpCloud's greatest value is. It's not just in the technical cool stuff that you can do with it that I nerd out about. It's that it creates a super seamless user interface where it's so much easier to manage that relationship when they've got a single app on their phone and it's like, hey, is this you? Yes, great. Carry on today. Right. And where you guys are headed with passwordless authentication, I think that I've like run into other IT people who work at other companies, either other clients or other MSPs. And I'm like, hey, not for nothing, if you haven't checked out JumpCloud, like, I know you're a competitor, but you should definitely go check it out. These guys, like, it's so dope. And his just, like anything, if you don't use it well, it's not going to go well, right?
Exactly.
It's not like if you use JumpCloud and just botch your rollout, the users aren't gonna love it, right? It's not without requiring skill from the implementer, but when you do it right, boy oh boy, does it pay off, right? It's like labeling your cables, and you're just putting in the labor at the front end and making your life so much easier going forward.
Yeah, for sure. And I will say one of the few downsides of my job is that I have a peek behind the curtain, under the hood, and there's so many things that I want to geek out about right now, but I can't. So Like it's just like whether it's two, or it's not quite on the roadmap yet, or it's just like ideas percolating behind the scenes and stuff like that. And because I'm overly cautious about, I don't want to leak stuff out there, but like, man, there's so much stuff that I've seen, so much growth that I've seen over the past almost 4.5 years at this company. Like the amount of growth from the very beginning, where I looked up JumpCloud, where I just stumbled across it while looking for tools, and being like, hey, this thing has potential, to the creation of the JumpCloud PowerShell module, to adding on MDM functionality, to software management, to OS patch management, and a whole bunch of other stuff to come. And I mean, there's constantly stuff being added to it. And I think that, I'm not necessarily saying this to shill JumpCloud. I think that this can be true of so many other vendors out there, where if you're not keeping an eye on the releases. Like, I know we're a Google shop, so Google is terrible about doing, like, it seems like most of their releases are stealth releases, and where it's like oh, I found out about, like, on their shared drives or their team drives, about them being able to do, they're changed to folder level permissions, like probably 6 months after it was released. And I found out about it on accident, where I just stumbled across it. But so that, I think, to keep on the edge of the functionality of your tools that you use, I hate to say it, but it's kind of on the IT admin. It's kind of on them to be on top of that, all of that.
Yeah, definitely. Because we've been a JumpCloud partner for so long, and really try to push the envelope on what implementation can look like. I've had the privilege to speak with a lot of the various product owners and senior engineers over there over the last few years. And, tuning into the quarterly roadmap and being like, hey, this looks awesome. When can we get early access? When can we play with this? And if you were to just not engage with that, and not watch those webinars, and not ask the questions and have those meetings, I think it would be easy to find yourself in the situation where patch management comes out at JumpCloud, or now you can do MFA on Radius and LDAP, and you didn't know about that, right? You were just like, oh, okay, I guess, whatever. It's like, no, you can do MFA now on your Synology. That's super cool. Like,
yeah.
But yeah, it does require a degree of engagement, which I think is, I think engagement and ownership is probably the single, or the combination of those is the single greatest determining indicator of how good you're going to be at your job. It's not it's not what you went to school for. It's not your memory recall. It's not your writing ability or your business acumen. It's how engaged are you, and how do you sink your teeth into this and carry it forward like it's your own? Because people, when they care about what they're doing, they do so much better work. Like, you could be bad at your job, and if you're really engaged, like, or you might not have a strong aptitude in your field, and then you just are like super engaged, and you can overcome almost anything.
Oh yeah, for sure.
If you just like care. And I think that, not just in IT, in any field, you can talk to someone at work and you can be like, that person's checked out. And when you talk to someone who's like really engaged, you're like, wow, that was super refreshing. That person like knows exactly what they're dealing with. They're super engaged, informative, helpful. And I think that ownership and kind of is inspiring. And when you see it within when companies culture reflects that, it's infectious. And you're working with everyone who's just like, oh, I got to turn out this super cool thing. I'll catch you with drinks later. I want to get this out the door. And they're like, well, hang on, what do you got going on over there? That's really cool. And it's not about like staying late. It's about caring about what you're working on. And the quality of the work that flows from that it's just night and day. And going back to, I think, where we started today about continual improvement and pushing the envelope, all of that comes from if you enjoy what you're doing. If you are interested and you're like, this is cool, all the rest of that, like, it flows so much easier. So if you find yourself out there where you're like not pushing the envelope, you're not trying to do all these things, ask yourself, like, are you interested? Do you think it's cool? And if it's not, like, maybe make some changes.
Yeah. And I think there's part of it. I heard this from a colleague a while ago, or I can't remember who, where no, it wasn't a colleague. It was somebody not even, it was like I was talking to some people, and I started geeking out about something that I was working on. And they made the comment of like, well, I hope you don't act like that when you're talking to people about it. I'm like, of course I act like this when I talk to people about it. Because like if I show that I'm excited about working on something, about the like how either like the possibilities or whatever, like you said, it's infectious. It gets across. It gives I don't know, it just adds that extra element that will help with buy-in, that will help with team development. I mean, the best example I can give is that the when I first successfully made a working Lambda in AWS, I was so happy and I was so proud of myself. And I shared it with the team. I'm like, this is so neat. I mean, it was something simple of pulled audit logs from the Atlassian API and moved it into a S3 bucket. That's all it did. But I was so happy about getting that automated, and and with a Lambda and like working on it, I saw the potential of like, okay, how else can we leverage Lambda? Like, but just the mentality and that excitement, sharing it with my team, they started getting excited about, oh, how can we start using this? And it's just, that's what it's all about. That's, don't be afraid to show your passion. Don't be afraid to geek out, because that helps other people. That helps buy-in. That helps,
helps your stress level.
It does. It really does.
Right? Like, I think that there have been times in my life where I was working 12, 14-hour days, 16-hour days. And when it's stuff that you like, you're like, it's not work. It's not taxing. I didn't go home feeling like, oh my God, I can't believe I have to do this tomorrow. I go to sleep and I'm like, ooh, let me get back on my computer. This is cool.
Yeah. I definitely understand that. And like, especially when working on like automation projects and stuff like that, I very much get into that zone. Or be sitting down watching TV with my wife, and then all of a sudden I stand up and like, I had an idea. But
it's to everyone in the like IT space. I mean, I think this applies well outside of IT. I think if you were an accountant, if you were a line cook, if you were a custodian, I think that, to find the parts that like make you excited. And I think that for me, and I hope that other people share this, is that when you take pride in the work that you're doing, regardless of what your field is and what your role in the big machine is, when you are like, I did this better, right, than I did yesterday, I found a new way to do it, I like thought outside the box, and I was like, you know what? Why are we using this product when we could use this one? It offers all these benefits. When you have that ownership and try and do better, and they're not just like, that's good enough. When you get to that line where you've made some incremental improvement, it's extremely gratifying and cathartic.
Yeah.
And I think you get, like, you know, not quite runner's high, but something to that effect. There's an endorphin release, and it's, you know, when people say like, oh, you know, they just go to work just to pay the bills, you could take that approach, or you could do the exact same job and just like find something that you're interested in it, and try and do better, and then it doesn't become a drain, you know. And I think that almost everyone I know, they wax and wane on that one. You can't maintain maximum enthusiasm every day.
Maybe if you're Greg Keller, you can.
But certainly to aim for that. And it's also a really good canary in the coal mine of like, are you doing a good job?
Mm-hmm.
Are you happy with the work you're doing? If you are, you're probably doing a good job. And if you're like, ugh, I don't really like what I'm doing, well, there's a missing ingredient there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for both the employer and the employee, and the client and the family and the dog, everyone is benefiting when you're like, how was work today? And you're like, it was so cool. I built this thing.
And I think that an important aspect of that, especially those of us who are in the IT field, you know, with these continual improvements, you know, with automation, with all, you know, all the different tools and skills and stuff that are out there that you can leverage. I think what a lot of people miss is that, you know, when looking at your job and you're like, it's a slog. I work 15-hour days, or, you know, constantly, or, you know, I haven't been able to take a vacation in, you know, 2 years or whatever. But a lot of these things out there that, you know, you and I are getting excited about or get excited about, they can lead you to working, you know, to getting closer to that 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, having time for yourself and your family. Like, it's, yeah, there's a learning curve. Yeah, there's effort put into it. But in the long run, it's designed to be a force multiplier. You know, work smarter, not harder, that whole thing.
Yeah.
And when you get this automation up, and you get these tools in place, or you get, you know, these efficiencies into place, you know, no matter where they fall in, and you give yourself that extra breathing room, you get yourself to that point where there's less pressure on you. You actually get to sit back and look at not only, hey, I accomplished this, but hey, I actually like my job. Like that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the learning curve, I think that is one of the scarier parts for people. I think that it's inherently intimidating to like stare up at a mountain and be like, whoa, I have to climb this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the taller and steeper that learning curve is, the more daunting the summit looks like. But like, people climb Everest all the time. It's like, you know, one foot in front of the other. You can do it. Like, those other people did it. You can do it too. And a lot of it's just time. You know, a lot of the coolest stuff I think that I learned between 9 p.m. and 3 in the morning reading about it, right? Wasn't always just stuff that I'm doing at work. You're like, how does that work? It's like, I just got to play with it. And there are areas that I have not dabbled in that I would like to, that are really interesting. Speaking about automation, we had a project in the last few months where we were building out some infrastructure in AWS. Client had an AWS environment. It was built by a previous firm, and it wasn't built on like a holistic vision. They didn't do a lot of planning. They built and then added an expansion and added an expansion, and then just built stuff organically, and it was kind of a mess. We rebuilt it from scratch. And a colleague of mine was like, let's build, when we build this new stuff in US East 2, let's do the entire thing in Terraform. Yep. And I'm not, because I'm not a developer, Terraform wasn't the first thing that I would have reached for. And I've like played with Ansible in the past, but it was such a cool experience to see this new tool that is like new to me. It's not new to the world. And it's exciting and it's cool. And I'm like, wow, I would really like to get into this. And he worked at an AWS consulting firm for a while. So his AWS chops were super slick. Yeah. And watching him do his thing in Terraform, I'm like, whoa, like this is really cool. I got to spend some nights getting into this. I got too many meetings during the day. I can't do it in the middle of the day, but like, but you know, work smarter, not harder. I've got another client where they're going through a merger, and we're thinking about what is the next iteration of their infrastructure look like. Yeah. Stand up some new VMs in Asia. It's like, well, do we want to do this in Terraform? You know, now I'm thinking about it more that way. It's like, well, you know, you're 600 people today, but are you going to be 6,000 in how long? What's your growth plan? And like, how many more offices, how many more countries are we going to have to do this in? Do we want to do it every time? Do we want to do it now and then just like tweak a couple variables? I think that there's a like childlike enthusiasm and kind of wonder and like, ooh, Christmas morning, what are we gonna do? You know, I want to go play with some new toys. And that excitement, it all bleeds in. It's all like an extension of the same thing. When you're excited and engaged and you take ownership and you're interested and you're like not afraid of climbing up the mountain, then all of a sudden you're like, you look back over 5 years, like, whoa, I learned so much stuff, and the solutions I'm deploying now are just like, they're so buttoned up, and you can feel like it's not just that I'm confident in it. I love being able to show competitors the stuff I'm working on. I'm like, hey, check out what we just did. Like, it's so cool.
I don't care who you are. I would love to talk about, you know, the things that we're doing. And, you know, once my eyes just on a broader thing, once my eyes were opened to the powers of APIs, it was like, for me, that was where I saw the real shift in my career and how I approached work. Because now every time we're looking at a new solution, it's like, oh, do you have a REST API that we could leverage? Can we do, is it read only? Is it read write? What can we do to make this work? For like with JumpCloud, with the integrations that we have, we have integrations for a lot of, whether it's SSO or SCIM or whatever, for a lot of things, but there's also a bunch out there that we don't have because new stuff comes out all the time. But like, as long as I have an API, I have the JumpCloud API, I have this product API, and I have either a Lambda or an EC2 or something along those lines where I can interact, to act as the middleman between the two. Magic can happen off of that.
I think, in my experience, the success of those is often on the documentation.
That is very true.
Right? Saying, oh yeah, we have an API. Where's the documentation? Well, you'll figure it out.
Yeah, I will say that what helped my API knowledge, and even like when switching to a new language, like I'm working on on bolstering my Python knowledge, since I've mostly worked in PowerShell before now. But like something that's helped a lot are the documentations, or things like Postman, where it actually will help build out the API call for you, like in the documentation. And I was so happy when they added that to our API documentation. And so, just being able to build out those calls and, either copy paste or take it and dismantle it and tweak it to do exactly what you want to do. But you're right. I've dealt with companies that had immaculate API documentation, and then I've dealt with the other end of the spectrum, where it was either no documentation or might as well have been no documentation.
I mean, a slight tangent here, but when I am evaluating hardware and software vendors, like, price and feature set is not the only thing being considered. No. The quality of their documentation is really, really important. Not to name names, but when I'm like choosing between Cisco, SonicWall, FortiGate for a hardware appliance for a firewall, like, how good's your documentation in each of those cases? And say what you will about Cisco, they've got excellent documentation.
They do. It's their licensing that drives me nuts.
Yeah.
But you're right. Their documentation is top notch.
Yeah. I mean, the paperwork is not fun with Cisco, but once you have it in your hands, and you have you can, if you've got a question, it's probably been answered in the documentation, the administrator guides, the programmable guides, all of it. And I mean, hand in hand with that is, what's the quality of your support? And I mean, I could spend a whole day just talking about support calls. It does kind of boggle my mind that, especially more junior people in IT, they think that they can call support and support's just going to like fix it for them. And instead it's like, no, support is a tool that you use to help yourself fix it. But like, you have to, you have to steer them in the right place. You have to equip the vendor support with all the things that they need, the logs, the remote access, whatever. You can't just be like, hey guys, here are the keys. I'll like see you on Monday. It's going to be working, right? Thanks. Bye. It's like, no, it's a collaborative process. And how good, I've been on countless hours of support calls. How good your support is really makes a difference. I don't really want to throw anyone under the bus, but I think I have to. I have worked with VMware support a bunch, and their support's honestly pretty solid. You can get a hold of some very, very smart engineers who really know this stuff inside and out. And I once bought VMware licensing through Dell, got it bundled with a host because it was so much cheaper. Hey, we're going to need production support for VMware. We're going to be doing a bunch of vMotion stuff. It's going to be, we need access to VMware support. I'm like, yeah, it's okay. We got it. And it turns out, no, Dell, when that happens, Dell takes over the support contract, and you'll talk to their virtualization team. They're not ESXi engineers. They don't know that product inside and out. And it was really frustrating. And I was like, all right, note to self, don't buy VMware licensing through Dell.
And I will say this: we have several former VMware people on our staff, and I will back up what you said. They are some of the smartest people that I know.
Yeah. So I've been like real, and I love Dell's hardware. They're, as far as I'm concerned, the go-to hosts. Like, I'm not going to not do business with them. They're great. But what are you actually going to be able to get out of a thing? And know what you're getting into. And that was an instance of a little penny wise, pound foolish. Didn't realize what that concession meant. And there are many places where I'm like, I don't need vendor support. I could do this in my sleep.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we also work with Dell as well, and they're one of the ones where it's like their hardware is solid, and our knowledge, the knowledge base of me and my team is enough so where we don't need to deal with Dell support.
Right.
So
those are all things that I kind of have to evaluate when picking and choosing directions where to go. But it's just so refreshing when you get on the phone with someone or on a screen share and they're just like kicking ass and taking names and like, oh, I'm just going to come over here and whoop, oh, there we go. This certificate expired and this is a hidden certificate. You wouldn't even be able to see it. This is a known bug. Yeah, I thought it was fixed in the last patch, but it's okay. Here we go. And you're off. And you're like, wow, that was so good. Also, speaking to the learning curve thing, I have learned so much by being on screen shares with support that are doing stuff that's above my level. And you're like, I'll ask questions like, hey, so that command, what was it was -F. What was that flag for? And they're like, oh, okay. All right. I see what's going on here.
Yeah.
They're a wealth of information if you use them correctly, right? You can't just like drop the kids off at the pool.
Yeah, they're not fire and forget. Like you said, it's a collaborative effort. And going back to engagement, if you are engaged with the support teams that you're going to for help, you're going to get as a lot out of it. Because every support person that I've known who's worth their wages will be more than happy to share that knowledge with you.
Oh yeah, they're usually nerds too. They're like, oh hell yeah.
Even aside from them being nice, that helps them do that helps them do their job because they're empowering you, and so when it comes up again, you're not calling them, you're fixing it yourself.
Right. There have been that is often a good indicator where I am now in my career and my technical competency. If I get on the horn with a support person and I tell them something and they're like, oh, I didn't know that was possible. I'm like, all right, can we escalate this?
Yeah.
But use all those opportunities as learning opportunities. When I was, I don't know, let's call it 5-6 years ago, I hadn't really touched Linux and I was kind of scared of it. And I was working with a film production company and who had a bunch of Linux servers, and you just got thrown into the deep end and had to learn about it. And there was an admin who was there who kind of like helped. He was like, hey, this is VI. This is how that works. And I'm like, okay, all right. Thanks for the tip, man. That was really helpful. I couldn't figure out how to edit files before. Not trying to mess with this Emacs nonsense or Nano. And, seeing people who are your seniors who have been doing this, watch them with a magnifying glass and try and be a sponge and just soak it up.
Oh, yeah.
It's so helpful to be able to ask questions. One of the things that actually led me to JumpCloud, this is a fun story and maybe one worth closing on. 7-8 years ago, something like that, I was at this client with the Linux servers, and they were using a SAN metadata controller for their video production, and they also had another Linux server that was for their file sharing. And they were all using, it was CentOS, and they were using local Linux users. And I was like, we should really do some kind of like shared directory. Let's use LDAP. And I was like, yeah, I want to learn about this LDAP thing. Let's try setting it up from scratch. I tried to do it from command line the whole way, setting up Kerberos. Yeah, that's the right face. Yeah,
I've never been brave enough to do that.
It was brutal. Well, I bashed my head against it for several months and just couldn't ever get it all the way. And I was like, I just really want to I went to our COO and was like, I really just want to find someone who's an LDAP expert. I know if I could just ask a couple questions about like how this thing is supposed to work, I could figure it out. And then we were like, reframing this problem. This is not a problem of how to get LDAP to work. Let's use JumpCloud.
Yeah.
And that was basically the first time that I really got into the weeds with JumpCloud. And it was unequivocally a better answer. It took 5 minutes to set up, not months of me bashing my head in failure, like trying to Kerberos stood up from command line. It was a much smoother user experience. The reliability, consistency, like every part about it was superior to vanilla command line LDAP running on this 6-year-old CentOS box.
Yeah.
And so much of I think so much of problem solving is framing the problem. And if you frame the problem in such a way, you might not have a good answer. So when I frame the problem of like, I need to get this LDAP to work, that it didn't have a happy ending because it was the framing of the problem didn't allow for a good solution. And when we step back and reframe the problem of like, hey, how do we just like have a better authentication experience? Oh, JumpCloud is a like way better tool here. You change the angle you view it from, and then all of a sudden this like solid wall is actually a thin line of a card, and you're like, oh, this is really easy to walk around.
Yeah, exactly. You don't always have to do it yourself, because if you're having a problem, it's more than likely that somebody else has had that same problem, and there might be a solution out there already for it.
I will say though, for as frustrating as it was to like admit defeat and not being able to like finish it had to deal with like the PAM and getting LDAP to talk to Samba. I could get LDAP to work, but Samba couldn't get the modules to line up. I learned so much about Linux over those few weeks, right? Of just like really getting in the weeds. And so even though I look at that as I think about that story often as it's like it was a technical failure and a technical success. It was a failure on my trying to get JumpCloud to LDAP stood up. It was a huge success by pivoting to JumpCloud. And it was a really remarkable learning opportunity in the middle where I just like learned a ton about LDAP, how it works under the hood, how Kerberos works under the hood, how Linux and password management work. Like it was a extremely rewarding use of the time. And in the end, I mean, I definitely burned a bunch of time that my company ended up eating of me, like trying to build a solution that we ended up aborting to go to JumpCloud with. But everyone was happy, right? The client got something that they were after. I got to learn a ton.
Don't be afraid to fail.
Don't be afraid to fail. It's the best teacher.
Yeah, it really is. And that's, I tell my team that, okay, you fail, learn, move on.
Have an exit strategy. Have a backup.
Exactly.
Have a rollback plan. if you have a good like exit strategy, don't be afraid to make a mistake.
Exactly. Okay, so that's all the time that we have for this episode. Again, my guest today is Reilly Scull. Reilly, thank you so very much for coming on and chatting with me. It has been a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me. Talk to you next time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay. So we're good. So thanks again, Reilly. This is like I said, sitting down, talking shop, and conversation goes where it goes, and it turns out good. Thank you for tuning in to Where's the Any Key. If you like what you heard, please feel free to subscribe. Again, my name is Ryan Bacon. I lead IT at JumpCloud, where the team here is building a cloud-based directory platform that provides frictionless, secure access to virtually any IT resource from trusted devices anywhere. You can learn more and even set up a free account at jumpcloud.com.